I love Thanksgiving. Like, you don't understand. I love Thanksgiving. As far back as I can remember, it's always been my favorite holiday. And maybe it's because it brings together three of the things that I love the most in this world, which are cooking and eating way too much food, sitting on the couch all day and watching sports, and spending a bunch of time with the people I love the most. And I'm lucky to have experienced more than 40 classic American Thanksgivings on this planet, right up until last year when I was diagnosed with celiac on November 21st, 2 days before Thanksgiving. So hey, I got to go out with a bang last year. One more Thanksgiving. And then the next day was my first day eating gluten-free. Black Friday, am I right? That means that this year, 2024, is my first official gluten-free Thanksgiving. And I'm not willing to skip any of the classics. Now, you don't need me to tell you how to make Thanksgiving dishes that are already gluten-free, like turkey or mashed potatoes or cranberries. And you don't need my help making gluten-free versions of dishes with ingredients that are easy to substitute, like mac and cheese or stuffing or those little crispy onions on top of green bean casserole. But there are a few traditionally glutinous Thanksgiving must-haves that you should make from scratch and require a little gluten-free know-how to pull off. In this special Thanksgiving series on Jay vs. Gluten, we're going to tackle three of them: dinner rolls, gravy, and on today's episode, pie crust. What is Thanksgiving without pie? Pie is Thanksgiving. The problem is most store-bought gluten-free pie crusts are either crappy or they're hard to find. So we're gonna make our own. Once again, we're going back to the well with the loopy whisk with our extra flaky all butter pie crust recipe in the description. You can use this one for apple pie. You can use it for pumpkin pie. You can use it for no-bake pies, like a chocolate pudding pie or something like that. You can use it for savory pies, like a chicken pot pie. This is a very, very versatile recipe and can handle basically any pie you want to throw at it. Okay, for this recipe, you are going to need 190 grams of white rice flour, 115 grams of potato starch, and 75 grams of cornstarch. All three of these starches are like crispy starches, so they're gonna make this extra crispy. Along with that, you're gonna add 2 tablespoons of sugar, or if you're gonna make a savory pie, you can cut that down to 1 tablespoon of sugar, along with 1.5 teaspoons of xanthan gum and half a teaspoon of salt. So we're gonna mix all these in the bowl here. Everybody in. To that, we are gonna add 250 grams of chilled cubed butter. It's really important that it's cubed, and it's really important that it's chilled. We're gonna mix all of this into the flour mixture. And the goal here is to coat all of the individual little butter cubes in the flour mixture. You know what? I got gloves on. And the next step is we are going to squish all these little butter cubes down into flat, kind of buttery discs. I'm gonna go from this to this. Now it's gonna take a while because there's a lot of butter in here. I like to start on one side of the bowl, and as I flatten the butter, kind of move it to the other side of the bowl so that I know which ones I've squished and which ones need squishing. When your butter has been fully squished, it'll look like this. Now it is time for the water. Now this is not gonna seem like enough water. We want this to be as cold as possible. It's 150 grams of like very cold water. Just to kind of mix this together. Now it's, again, the water is not gonna seem like enough, but do not be tempted to add more. When you add more moisture to pie crust, that's when it gets tough. We want this to stay super flaky. Hand mixing time. Okay, so kind of gently squeeze and knead this kind of butter flour pile together. And over time, the heat of your hand is going to melt some of the butter, and the flour will mix in. Just kind of squeeze against the sides a little bit, squeeze against the bottom, flip some of the dry stuff over on top. It's going to take a few minutes. No one said this was like super fast. It's starting to come together. You can see it. Trust the process. Okay, I think we're there. Okay, we are gonna wrap this guy in some plastic. So you're gonna kind of want to get this into like a 10 by 6 rectangle or so. So fold a square of plastic, or I'm sorry, fold a rectangle of plastic. That's about 10 by 6. You can always employ a rolling pin. That's easier. This is gonna go in the fridge for at least a half an hour before we proceed to the next step. Now we are going to laminate the dough. Laminating dough is just kind of a fancy term for folding it over on itself and rolling it out, and then folding it over on itself and rolling it out. That process creates a zillion layers in anything that you're baking. That's how croissants are made. That's how Queen Amman are made. That's how any kind of puff pastry is made. And that's how our pie crust is going to be made. Take your chilled pie dough rectangle. We're going to want to roll it out on parchment paper here. That'll make it easier. All right, so we're about 6 by 10 here, maybe a little bit wider, maybe a little bit longer. But the goal is to get this to about like 18 inches long this way. Potato starch a little bit so that the butter doesn't stick to the rolling pin. This is a pretty pliable dough. Gluten-free dough kind of has a tendency to be dry, or at least have a reputation of being dry. This is really flexible, it's really nice. And once you get it rolled out, you're gonna wanna do a letter fold. Letter fold is when you take the top and you fold that down, and you take the bottom and you fold that up. Stuck a little bit to the parchment here. There you go. And so you're folding the dough like a letter. Then we're gonna do the same thing again. So that's our first letter fold of about, let's say 5. Roll it out vertically. So every time we fold and roll, we're creating a bunch more layers. Let's do our second fold. Top down, bottom up, and then we turn it 90 degrees. And we flip it over, and then we do it again. Top down, bottom up. And we are going to start our fourth fold. Top down, bottom up. Okay, after this last roll, we're going to fold it up one more time. And then we're going to wrap it in plastic and put it in the fridge for about 30 minutes. Top down, bottom up, and get into a little package. Into the fridge. Okay, our laminated pie dough has chilled for at least 30 minutes. And it is time to roll out the pie. This recipe makes 2 pie crusts. I am only going to use one of these at the moment. So I'm going to cut this in half. Looks like about half. Whatever your preferred method for rolling out pie dough is, go for it. I'm going to try to roll this between 2 separate sheets of parchment paper and see how that goes. Time to go in the pie dish. We are in. Maybe patch a couple of holes here, but we're in pretty good shape. Make sure you get down all the way into the corners. If there's any holes in the bottom, you can kind of tear off little bits and patch them up. If you see any thin spots, you can do the same thing. Okay, we're gonna trim off any real extra bits, leaving a little bit of an overhang. With that extra little edge, you kind of fold it up under itself. You're creating like an extra thick lip on the edge of the pie. And we're gonna do one more step after that to crimp it. Now this pie plate has little crimped edges, so all you gotta do is kind of press them into there to follow that. If you have a non-crimped pie plate, you kind of do this move with your fingers. Now that our pie crust is in our pie plate, this is gonna go back in the fridge for one last time. I promise this is the last time before we blind bake this guy. So I'll see you then. The pie crust has chilled in the fridge and it is time to blind bake. What is blind baking? Blind baking is when you bake a pie crust without any of the stuff in it. There are a couple of reasons why you might do that. You have a really wet filling, like pumpkin pie, for example. You want to bake this so that it's like as sealed and as solid as possible before you put all that wet stuff on it, because that's going to make it soggy. Also, if you're going to do like a no-bake pie, you can bake this the whole way before you fill it with whatever is going to go in it. If you are cooking something that is not super wet, I mean, all pie filling is wet, but some of them are more wet than others, like apple pie or like a chicken pot pie, or something that requires a top. You can fill it right now, put the top on, throw it in the oven. We're gonna blind bake this the whole way. First, we have to kind of weigh it down with something. We are gonna use this piece of parchment. And here's a tip. Crumple it all up. Paper is a little bit more soft and flexible. Otherwise, this tends to create some like harsh corners. So you're gonna put this into the middle of your pie crust. And we are gonna weigh this down with something. If you have purpose-built pie weights, you can use those. If you have dried beans, you can use that. But I am gonna use some rice. Make sure you kind of press it down into the oven, 20 minutes, 390, and then we're gonna pull it out, take this out with the rice and the paper, and it's gonna go back in for another 20 minutes. First part of the pie crust par bake is done, so let's take it out of the oven. So this is gonna go back in the oven for about another 20 minutes or until everything is golden brown and crispy. When the pie shell is fully baked, it'll look like this. Pretty golden brown, crispy. You can see that I made a couple of mistakes here, and I'm glad I did this on my dry run before Thanksgiving. Number one, I didn't do really a good job of crimping the crust up over the top of the pie shell. This pie plate is pretty steep. It's got pretty steep sides. So you really need to like kind of seal the crust up and over the edge so it doesn't shrink down like this. The second thing is that I didn't poke holes in the bottom of the dough. It's called docking the dough. You usually do it with a fork. I was gonna do it, totally had it in mind to do it, and totally slipped my mind. But the good news is, this looks like this worked out. You can take the shell entirely out of the pie pan by itself. It's still pretty hot. Look how solid and rigid and crispy this is. We're gonna let it cool. Still pretty hot. But we're gonna come back to it and give it a taste. We're just gonna taste it straight up. I'm excited for this one. We are finally ready to taste our gluten-free pie shell. We're gonna do it straight up, and we are gonna do our best to simulate an apple pie. I got some applesauce here that was in the fridge. So I'm gonna go applesauce and pie crust to see how it goes. You know, we're still 2 weeks out from Thanksgiving. We don't have apple pie filling just laying around. I'm gonna rip into a pie crust and see what it tastes like. It is definitely flaky. This might be better than a regular pie crust. This tastes like really crispy, thin, barely sweet, like shortbread. Let's try it with the applesauce. Tastes like an apple like turnover, like apple hand pie. Like something you get like a gas station in a good way. I don't know, guys. Gluten-free baking ain't bad. Gluten-free pie crust. Happy Thanksgiving. Give it a shot. See you next time.